Um, So to have a full board, it's shared workload. Those advisory committees that work really well have subcommittees. Alameda County has an advisory committee of 11. They also have something like 8 subcommittees. It's huge. And those subcommittees meet also once a month. And you're required to be on 2 of those subcommittees. So they are very, very well organized, and I think probably the most well organized and the oldest one in the state. They've been around a while, been able to look at this for quite a while, how to work. But by having a full advisory committee, you're also showing the board's commitment to your mandates. If you go to the Board of Supervisors with your recommendations, there are only 4 of you out of a potential 11. That doesn't show a whole lot of credibility. So it's very, very important for you to keep those numbers up. You get also a much wider input base on issues and what's going on in your county if you have a full member board, because they come from different constituents in your county, one would hope. Okay, let's go back to the process of getting advisory committees on. A lot of advisory boards have nominating subcommittees. In Santa Clara County we do, I know Alameda does. You do? Okay. Does Marin have a subcommittee for nominations? Yeah. So I think a lot of them do. It makes the work a little bit easier if you have a subcommittee that's going to actually, when a vacancy comes up, that would be a committee that would not meet on a regular basis, but on an as-needed basis when you have a need. The advisory committee themselves should assume responsibility to fulfill those vacancies on the advisory committee. Now, this can be problematic. In a lot of counties, it's a top-down situation where the Board of Supervisors, the board aides, or the clerk of the board will get people and say, this is who you're going to have. Or the public authority will do that, or IHSS will do that. We SECA strongly recommends that you do that yourself, that you as the advisory committee get folks on there and present them to these other folks. If you couch it right, I mean, for the county and for the Board of Supervisors, it's kind of a pain in the neck for them to have to fulfill that board. So if you can get in there and say to those board aides or to whoever, you know, we have a real ear to the community and we know who's out there and who might be a real asset to this board. May we present you with these folks and let you do your due diligence, if you will, and then put them on, through the Board of Supervisors. So that is what we recommend that you do, is try to get them to fulfill what you need. Another thing too is you must know your bylaws. How many people sit on that board, and what's the makeup of that position? Now, by mandate, you have to have 55% of your board has to be past or present users of in-home support services. But outside of that, you probably also delineate other categories. Like you might have a union member. You might have a senior advocate. You might have somebody that has to be on from one of your independent living centers. You might have some constituencies that say you might have underserved, somebody that would represent the underserved populations in your county. You might have somebody that's an advocate for health. You know, there's all different, depending on what your county needs are, and everybody's bylaws are going to be a little bit differently as to what that configuration of your advisory committee has to look like. But you have to know what that is before you can get those members. And when a slot's empty, you have to know, okay, somebody just resigned. What slot were they in? Because you have to fill that particular slot. Okay, another thing that we recommend is that you establish a basic criteria for your advisory committee member. And this is, I think it's just helpful so that you have a vision of what you would like that advisory committee member to look like. You want somebody that's interested in it, that has an interest in IHSS in some way, shape, or form. They also have to have a commitment. This advisory committee should be a working committee. You shouldn't have people that are just there for the free lunch. Somebody that wants to go out and visit with their friends. Somebody that wants to get that cookie and that cup of tea. You know, they have to have a commitment to what you're working on, and they have to know it's a working committee. Something is going to be expected of them, and they have to be willing to do that. So that might be part of you want to have that written down as part of your criteria so that people know what the expectation is coming onto your committee. They have to have the time. They have to be willing to find the time to be able to do this. And a lot of your bylaws will say if they miss so many meetings, they're off. Or say if you miss 3 meetings in a year, you know, you're eligible to be terminated. They also have to have a very strong desire to be educated at the front end and to keep currently educated. And this is huge. You have to have someone that's, you know, it's not, we know that initial education slope is very, very steep. Even if you're in the system, even if you're a provider or a consumer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you really understand the system. So they have to know coming in that this is not going to be, I'm just going to sit there. I'm going to have to take that handbook and read it and become educated quickly so that I can be effective. And a lot of us have term limits. And we know that it might take you, you know, if you've got a 3-year term limit, it's a good 2 years before you really understand what's going on in this system. So people need to know that. And that's another thing with term limits too. I thought, you know, there's a good and a bad with term limits. And we try to keep those. In Santa Clara County, we just got them to increase the term limits from 2 4-year terms to 3 4-year terms. So you can sit on it for 12 years, which I think is good. I mean, it just takes such a long time to get up and running. And I think another thing too is that these people have to understand and commit to the advisory role position, the advocacy role position. That when you are an advisory committee member, you not only represent your own needs, you represent the needs of all those other consumers and providers in the county that utilize IHSS, and really almost throughout the state, all 360,000 folks that are consumers and just a little bit more than that are providers. And that is an advocacy role. If you're afraid to use the advocacy word, use the education word. It's an educational role. And it's incredibly important that people understand this, that they are not there just to vent their own issues, that they are there to vent for all those other people that are not able to speak for themselves. And a lot of people are not comfortable in that role. If you think they're educable, that you can get them up to speed and you can educate them to that, fine. But if you find someone that says, I am not going to do that, I am not going to go visit my legislator, I am not going to go visit my board of supervisors, I am not going to go in and talk to the board aide, and I'm not going to talk in meetings, then they are not effective and you don't want them on your board. But it's helpful if you think about it and have it in writing for this process. Where to look for potential board members? Current members, lots of times your current members are going to have that information. Public authority staff, they have lots of contacts. The registry folks come in contact with consumers all the time. They have contact with providers. You know, utilize their interaction with consumers and providers to see, because getting people on that, you know, the advocate for the health, getting someone on that's from the Independent Living Center, getting somebody on from a different agency, that's not so difficult. Getting those good, helpful, effective providers and consumers is the real trick. And especially seniors is a really tough one. So you're going to have to use all these resources that are at your hand to get them on, because they are the nuts and bolts of your advisory committee, and you want them there, but you want them to be effective too. IHSS staff and social workers, They come in contact with a lot of consumers and providers, utilize their information. We were really lucky. I talked to Jim Ramoni, our IHSS director in Santa Clara County, and he said, gee, you know, I used to have this gal that was really a huge, great gal, senior, and she's just now utilizing IHSS, and she'd be wonderful. And sure enough, she is just a dynamite member of our advisory committee. County Independent Living Center, go to them, ask them if they have anybody. They come in contact with consumers all the time that utilize IHSS, and even some of their staff, you know, that's their function. County nonprofits that work with IHSS consumers and providers, you have probably a lot of those. And Santa Clara County, we've got HOPE, we've got Parents Helping Parents, we've got Greater Opportunities, we've got the Regional Center. You know, tap into those folks. And you should be tapping into them anyway. As advisory committees, you should have those people know who you are, all those nonprofits who share the same consumer base. We have them come about every 2 years, we get an update. We have them come to advisory committee meeting and let it, you know, like Parents Helping Parents. What are you doing? What's going on with your agency? You know, how can we work together? How, you know, let's have a dialogue here, keep current. Unions, outreach and public authority newsletters, and unions mailings and meetings and their contacts. This is where I go back though to saying what your basic criteria is and what are you looking for. Because when you advertise and you go out, outreach with mailings or that type of thing, a lot of people just do mailings in their newsletter, but I would suggest that you be very specific on what your criteria is so that you don't get somebody in there that you're gonna wanna get out in 2 months. So, you know, be careful, do your due diligence. Staff at senior congregate living facilities, that's another good place. Lots of the senior congregate living places or congregate living facilities for people with disabilities have social workers, or they have managers on site that really know their clientele well and can help you with that. Real quickly, let's see, what's the time frame here? Okay, Amy's going to be in here with her little sign before we know it. Educating advisory committee members. This is a huge issue and an ongoing process for advisory committees, and I don't think we really do enough of this. You know, we're here at the conference, and you people are educated, but how many of your other advisory committee members really don't have a clue or barely have a clue? And it's kind of, I see it as our job to go back home to our advisory committees and getting them running and up to date on what's going on. So new members is one of the issues. I want to say that once you have your nominating committee and you find people that are there, what you do, what your process is at home can be different. In Santa Clara County, we invite folks in to come to 2 meetings to see what we do, what it looks like, ask them if they're interested, that's sort of if they know what's going on. And then we actually do an interview with them, with the committee. The nominating committee does an interview with the individual, and then they get presented to the whole advisory committee. And sort of, there's not really no vote, but we of course, you know, it's sort of like a consensus that, gee, this person will be a great addition to our, and then it's presented to then you put it to the clerk of the board, or depending on how your county works. In our county, each of the board of supervisors have different slots that they fill, so you give them to that particular supervisor, and then it also goes to the clerk of the board to be on the consent calendar. Once they're on board, though, the education process is huge to make sure that they're up and running. So that handbook that I mentioned at the beginning, make sure they get it. You might want to give them a mentor, somebody else on your advisory committee that has been there for a while that can mentor them along a little bit so that they feel more comfortable and have somebody they can go to with questions that they have. If you're lucky enough for your public authority director to be really good, they might want to do a one-on-one meeting with them to bring them up to speed if that's who does the administrative work for your advisory committee.